standing beside my twin sister in our matching graduation gowns. I beamed with pride as we both received our medical degrees. 4 grueling years, countless sleepless nights, and over $300,000 in debt for each of us. At dinner that night, my parents raised their glasses. "We have an announcement," Dad said. "We've decided to pay off all of Ashley's student loans." My heart stopped. "What about Forrest?" my girlfriend asked. Mom patted my hand. "She deserves it more, honey." The room spun as my sister smiled. Growing up in Highland Park, an affluent Chicago suburb, my twin sister Ashley and I had what most would consider a privileged childhood. Our father built a successful career as a marketing executive for a Fortune 500 company, while our mother ran her own interior design business. From the outside, we seemed like the perfect American family, complete with a sprawling colonial home and annual vacations to Florida or California. But from an early age, subtle differences in how our parents treated us became apparent. On our 10th birthday, Ashley received a brand new mountain bike with all the accessories, while I got a basic model from the same store. When Christmas came around, her pile of gifts always seemed slightly larger, slightly more expensive. I told myself it was my imagination. Ashley was naturally outgoing and popular, the kind of child who made friends effortlessly. I was more reserved, preferring books and science kits to large social gatherings. By middle school, the pattern was clear. Dad never missed a single one of Ashley's soccer games, cheering loudly from the sidelines and taking the whole team for ice cream afterward, win or lose. But when I qualified for the regional science competition 3 years in a row, he attended only once, checking his phone throughout the awards ceremony. "Your sister needs more encouragement," Mom explained when I asked why they made such a fuss over Ashley's B+ in algebra while my straight A's warranted only a quick, "Good job. You're naturally gifted, Forrest. You don't need the same level of support." High school brought more of the same. I worked after-school jobs and maintained a 4.0 GPA while participating in the chess club and science Olympiad. Ashley divided her time between cheerleading and maintaining a respectable 3.7 average. When college application season arrived, my higher SAT scores and more impressive extracurricular resume generated less excitement than Ashley getting into the same universities as me. Everything changed during our sophomore year of college, when our grandfather suffered a massive heart attack. Watching the medical team work to save his life inspired both Ashley and me to pursue medicine. For once, we shared the exact same goal, and I thought perhaps this would finally put us on equal footing in our parents' eyes. I threw myself into MCAT preparation, scoring an impressive 520 out of 528. Ashley struggled more, eventually achieving a respectable 512. When the acceptance letters from Northwestern Medical School arrived for both of us, I thought my parents would finally see us as equally accomplished. Instead, they hosted a lavish party for the twins' acceptance, but toasted Ashley specifically for overcoming such obstacles to achieve her dream. Medical school began with both of us sharing an apartment near campus. The workload was brutal, but there was comfort in facing it together. We quizzed each other on anatomy terms late into the night and celebrated surviving our first cadaver lab with cheap champagne and pizza. For a while, it felt like we were truly equals, partners in the grueling journey to become doctors. But 6 months in, the old patterns re-emerged. I noticed Ashley regularly receiving care packages from our parents filled with expensive snacks, gift cards, and even new clothes. My mailbox remained empty. When I mentioned this casually over Sunday dinner at our parents' house, Mom seemed confused. "We thought you were doing fine on your own, Forrest. You've always been so independent." To make ends meet, I took a part-time job at the university library, working weekends, while Ashley focused solely on her studies. I assumed we were both taking out the same federal loans, with perhaps some equal help from our parents. We never discussed finances directly, maintaining the polite silence about money that our parents had instilled in us. During our second year, Ashley began struggling with biochemistry. Within days of her mentioning this to our parents, They had arranged and paid for a private tutor. When I later found myself confused by neuroanatomy, their advice was simple. Form a study group, Forrest. You're good at organizing things. The disparity was becoming harder to ignore, but I continued making excuses. Perhaps they were treating us equally in ways I couldn't see. Perhaps they were setting aside the same amount for each of us, but distributing it differently based on our needs. I couldn't imagine my own parents deliberately favoring one child over another. Then came the mid-program celebration dinner. We had survived the brutal first half of medical school, with its endless exams and sleep-deprived study sessions. Our parents hosted a small gathering at an upscale steakhouse in Chicago. After dinner, Mom and Dad stepped away to take a call, standing just around the corner from the restroom I was using. Yes, the Ashley Loan Fund is coming along nicely, my father was saying to someone, presumably their financial advisor. We should have enough to clear her entire medical school debt upon graduation. And what about Forrest's loans? Asked an unfamiliar voice. Forrest is different, Mom replied. He needs to stand on his own feet as a man. Ashley has always needed more support, and with the competitive field she's considering, she'll need a clean financial slate. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. They had been planning all along to pay off Ashley's enormous medical school debt while expecting me to shoulder my own. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about need or circumstance. This was a deliberate decision they had made years ago, without ever discussing it with me. I somehow made it through the rest of dinner, smiling mechanically, while feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under me. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I calculated the loans I had already accumulated. $160,000. With 2 more years of even more expensive clinical rotations ahead. By graduation, I would owe well over $300,000, a debt that would shape every decision in my adult life. Meanwhile, my twin sister would walk away free. The 3rd year of medical school brought clinical rotations, where we finally stepped onto hospital floors as medical students. I discovered a natural affinity for emergency medicine, thriving in the fast-paced environment where quick thinking and decisive action made immediate differences in patients' lives. The emergency department felt like home, despite the chaotic shifts and emotional challenges. Ashley struggled initially with her surgical rotation. The attending surgeons were demanding, and often critical. And for the first time in her life, her personable nature didn't automatically smooth her path. Within weeks of hearing about her difficulties, our parents arranged and paid for private coaching with a retired surgeon who charged $200 per hour. They're just trying to help her succeed, I told myself, even as my own loan balance ticked upward with every passing day. Then my car, a 12-year-old Honda with over 150,000 miles, finally gave up during a brutal Chicago winter. The repair costs exceeded its value, and I resigned myself to public transportation, adding an hour each way to my already grueling schedule. 3 weeks later, Ashley drove up to our apartment building in a brand new Honda CR-V. Mom and Dad thought I needed something safe for hospital parking lots at night, she explained, seemingly oblivious to the implications as I stood in my snow-soaked clothes after returning from a 40-minute bus ride. That Sunday, I finally gathered the courage to raise the issue at family dinner. I've been taking the bus since my car died, I said as casually as I could manage. It's adding 2 hours to my daily commute. Public transportation builds character, Dad replied, barely looking up from his roast beef. When I was your age, I took the bus everywhere. You bought Ashley a new car, I pointed out. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. That's different, Forrest, Mom finally said. Ashley has always been more delicate. She doesn't handle stress well, and we worry about her safety. And you don't worry about mine? You've always been stronger, Dad said firmly, in a tone that suggested the matter was closed. Ashley has special needs. I looked at my sister, who studied her plate intently. She hadn't asked for this preferential treatment, but she wasn't declining it either. That night, I lay awake calculating my mounting debt. Between undergraduate and medical school loans, I was approaching $325,000. The interest was already accumulating, and on a resident's salary, I would be making minimum payments for at least 15 years after graduation. It was around this time I met Sophia, a fourth-year medical student doing an emergency medicine sub-internship. Sharp, compassionate, and straightforward. She quickly noticed the difference in my situation compared to other students. "You're working way more shifts at the library than anyone else I know," she observed over coffee after a particularly exhausting shift. "And taking the bus in this weather? Don't your parents have the means to help?" Something about her direct question broke through my carefully constructed acceptance. I found myself telling her everything, from the childhood birthday disparities to the car situation to the overheard conversation about the Ashley Loan Fund. "That's seriously messed up," Sophia said when I finished. "Have you directly asked them about their plans for your loans?" I hadn't. The topic of money had always been considered impolite in our family, discussed in vague terms rather than specific numbers. "You need to," she advised. "This isn't about buying one child a better Christmas present. This is about setting up one twin for financial success while hobbling the other with debt for decades." As fourth year approached, both Ashley and I began considering specialties. I remained drawn to emergency medicine despite its middle-range compensation compared to other specialties. Ashley, after some deliberation, announced her interest in dermatology, one of the highest-paying and most lifestyle-friendly fields in medicine. Our parents' reaction was telling. "That's perfect for you, sweetheart," Mom gushed. "You'll have such a wonderful balance of professional success and personal life." When I confirmed my plans for emergency medicine, Dad frowned. "Are you sure about that, Forrest? The hours are terrible, and the pay isn't great considering your investment. Have you considered cardiology or orthopedic surgery?" "I love emergency medicine," I replied. "It's where I belong." "Well, it's your choice," he said with obvious disappointment. "But don't come complaining about money later." The irony of this statement, given what I knew about their financial plans, was almost too much to bear. Thanksgiving of our final year brought extended family together, and the contrast in how relatives treated our career choices was striking. Ashley's decision received universal praise, while mine generated concerned questions about burnout and work-life balance. Through it all, Sophia, whom I had begun dating, remained my steady support, squeezing my hand under the table when the conversations became particularly difficult. That evening, fortified by Sophia's encouragement and 2 glasses of wine, I finally asked the question directly. "Mom, Dad, I need to know your plans regarding my student loans after graduation. You've mentioned helping where you can, but I need specifics for financial planning." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Forrest, we've always encouraged independence," Dad began carefully. "You're going to be a successful doctor, fully capable of handling your financial responsibilities. And Ashley isn't?" I pressed. "Your sister's situation is different," Mom said. "Her specialty training will be very demanding, and we want her to focus entirely on that, without financial distractions." "My training will be demanding too," I pointed out. "Emergency medicine residency is notorious for its intensity." "Yes, but you've always been more resilient," Dad replied. The conversation circled without resolution, my parents never providing the clear answer I sought. Later that night, as Ashley and I helped clean up, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I thought you knew," she said quietly, her expression uncomfortable. "Mom and Dad told me years ago they were setting money aside to pay off my loans after graduation. I just assumed they were doing the same for you." The confirmation of what I had suspected hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the deliberate deception, the years of allowing me to believe in a fairness that never existed. "Why would they do that for you and not for me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ashley looked genuinely perplexed. "I don't know, Forrest. I really don't. I never questioned it. Maybe because you've always been the stronger one? The one who always succeeded without help?" So I'm being punished for being self-sufficient? The irony was almost too much to bear. I don't think they see it that way, she said. But her eyes revealed her own discomfort with the situation. Maybe you should talk to them again, more directly. But I already knew another conversation would yield the same vague justifications and deflections. My parents had made their decision long ago, and nothing I could say now would change it. The final year of medical school brought the stress of residency applications, interviews, and the looming reality of graduation. While my classmates focused solely on performing well in their sub-internships and preparing for interviews, I juggled additional clinical shifts at the university hospital to earn extra money. My health began to suffer. Insomnia became my constant companion, and I lost 15 pounds from my already lean frame. Dark circles took permanent residence under my eyes, and my immune system weakened, leaving me battling one minor illness after another. Meanwhile, Ashley flew across the country for interviews at the most prestigious dermatology programs, staying in nice hotels and enjoying dinners with program directors, all funded by our parents. I limited my applications to programs within driving distance, or those offering interview expense reimbursement, aware that each flight and hotel stay would ultimately add to my crushing debt burden. You need to see someone about this, Sophia insisted after I nearly fell asleep during one of our rare dinner dates. The resentment is eating you alive, and it's affecting your health. She was right. With her encouragement, I began seeing a therapist through the medical school's student health program, one of the few benefits fully covered by my student fees. Dr. Lewis helped me process the complex emotions I'd been suppressing for years. What you're describing is a profound inequity, she said during one session. Your feelings of betrayal and resentment are entirely understandable. The question now is how these feelings are affecting your life and career, and what you want to do about them. Match day arrived in March, the culmination of years of work, and the moment when medical students nationwide learn where they'll spend their residency years. I matched at Northwestern Memorial, a respected program in Chicago that had been among my top choices. Ashley matched at her second choice, University of Michigan's dermatology program. Our parents hosted an elaborate celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. The evening was ostensibly for both of us, but the reality was apparent in every detail. The cake featured a cartoon dermatologist with Ashley's name. The toasts focused primarily on her accomplishment in matching to a competitive specialty, and the gift bags contained a new stethoscope for me and a new iPad for Ashley to help with her complex dermatology studies. I maintained a polite smile throughout the evening, telling myself that in just a few months, I'd be Dr. Forrest Bennett, finally earning a salary, however modest, and beginning the career I had worked so hard to achieve. As graduation approached, the reality of loan repayment began to crystallize. I met with the financial aid office to understand my options, coming away with the sobering knowledge that my monthly payments would be approximately $3,500 on a standard 10-year plan. My expected first-year resident salary would be around $55,000, meaning nearly half my take-home pay would go to loan servicing. Even with income-based repayment, I would be financially constrained for at least 20 years. Unfortunately, you qualify for minimal loan forgiveness, the financial advisor explained, because your parents' income is too high. The system assumes they're helping you. The irony was almost too much to bear. Then came graduation day. Standing beside Ashley in our matching regalia, I felt genuine pride in our accomplishment. We had made it through one of the most demanding educational journeys imaginable. Despite everything, I loved my sister and was happy for her success. The dinner afterward began pleasantly enough, with extended family and close friends gathered at an upscale restaurant to celebrate. Then my father clinked his glass and stood for what I assumed would be a standard proud parent toast. "We have an announcement," Dad said, beaming. "Your mother and I have decided to pay off all of Ashley's student loans." The table erupted in applause and congratulations. Ashley smiled graciously, though I noticed she couldn't quite meet my eyes across the table. What about Forrest? Sophia asked from beside me, her voice cutting through the celebration. The table fell quiet. Mom patted my hand condescendingly. She deserves it more, honey. The room seemed to spin around me as Ashley accepted more congratulations. I somehow made it through the rest of dinner, focusing on breathing and maintaining my composure. Sophia's hand remained firmly in mine under the table, her grip anchoring me through the storm of emotions. 2 days later, my college roommate Jackson, whose parents were close friends with mine, called with information he thought I should know. I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, he said hesitantly, but it doesn't seem right. My parents mentioned your folks just closed on a vacation property in northern Michigan. They've put it in Ashley's name as a graduation gift. The news hit me like a physical blow. While advising me to find a cheaper apartment to manage my loan payments, they had purchased a second home for my sister. There's more, Jackson continued reluctantly. They were talking about how smart it was to invest in Ashley because of her earning potential in dermatology, while you chose a noble but less lucrative path. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence in my apartment, the full weight of the situation finally settling on me. This wasn't about need or circumstance or even parental blindness. This was a deliberate, calculated decision to invest in one child while leaving the other to struggle, based solely on potential financial return. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full force of my anger. It burned away the hurt and confusion, leaving behind a clarity I hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just unfair. It was wrong, and I would no longer simply accept it. Residency began with a brutal schedule of 80-hour weeks and rotating shifts that destroyed any semblance of a normal sleep pattern. While my fellow interns complained about the workload, I carried the additional burden of financial anxiety. Even with careful budgeting, I could barely afford my small apartment and basic living expenses while making minimum payments on my loans. The stress began affecting my performance. During a particularly chaotic shift in the emergency department, I nearly missed a subtle sign of aortic dissection in a 30-year-old patient. Dr. Marshall, the attending physician, caught the error and directed the appropriate workup, which confirmed the diagnosis. After the patient was safely transferred to surgery, Dr. Marshall asked me to join him for coffee in the physician's lounge. "You've got excellent clinical instincts, Bennett," he said, "but something's interfering with your focus. Want to talk about it?" Perhaps it was his direct but kind approach, or maybe I had simply reached my breaking point, but I found myself telling this respected senior physician the entire story. The childhood disparities, the overheard conversations, the graduation announcement, and now the vacation home. Dr. Marshall listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "That's not just unfair," he said when I finished. "It may actually have legal implications, particularly if your grandfather established educational trusts that were meant to be distributed equally." "I don't know anything about a trust," I admitted. "My parents never discussed the specifics of how they were funding Ashley's education." "I have a friend in hospital legal counsel," he offered. "She might be willing to give you some unofficial guidance." This isn't just about money, Forrest. This level of inequity can damage your well-being, and by extension, your ability to provide good patient care. The meeting with Sarah Kaplan, a healthcare attorney who also specialized in family law, proved enlightening. After hearing my situation, she asked pointed questions about my grandparents and any discussions of educational funding. "Your generation of medical students is facing unprecedented debt," she explained. "Many grandparents of means established educational trusts specifically to help their grandchildren with medical or law school. If such a trust existed, and your parents administered it inequitably, that could be problematic from a legal standpoint." Sophia, now in her first year of emergency medicine residency at a neighboring hospital, spent her rare free time researching family financial laws and trust regulations. Her determination to help me find justice only deepened my feelings for her. "Look at this," she said one evening, showing me a legal statute. If a trust was established for educational purposes for multiple beneficiaries, the trustee has a fiduciary duty to administer it equitably, unless the trust document specifically directs otherwise. My performance at work continued to suffer. After a second near miss with a diagnosis, Dr. Marshall pulled me aside. "I'm adjusting your schedule," he said firmly. "You're working too many extra shifts trying to manage those loan payments. It's affecting patient care, which I cannot allow, and it's also affecting your education as a physician." "I can't afford to work fewer shifts," I explained. "You can't afford not to," he countered. "I'm mentioning this as your program director, but also as someone who cares about your development. This situation with your family isn't just unfair. It's actively harming your medical training." Meanwhile, Ashley began her dermatology residency at Michigan, regularly posting photos on social media of her new apartment's lake view and weekend trips to Chicago. Her life seemed unburdened by the financial constraints, crushing most of our medical school classmates. In June, a group text arrived from my mother announcing a special celebration for Ashley planned for August. "We're hosting a debt-free celebration for Ashley. Join us in honoring her fresh start as a debt-free young physician." The message felt like salt in an open wound. Not content with their private favoritism, my parents were now throwing a party specifically to celebrate the disparity between their children. That evening, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother Ruth, my father's mother. Though we spoke occasionally, she had never been particularly involved in our daily lives, spending most of her time in Arizona since my grandfather's death 5 years earlier. "Forrest," she said without preamble, "I've been hearing concerning things about how your parents are handling financial matters between you and your sister. I'd like you to tell me your perspective." Her directness was surprising, but welcome. I shared the entire situation, including the latest celebration announcement. Her silence, as I finished, was weighty. "This is not what your grandfather and I intended," she finally said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "George established an educational trust for both of you before he passed. The funds were to be distributed equally for your higher education needs." The revelation sent a shock through me. There was a trust specifically for our education? "Yes," she confirmed. "George believed strongly in educational opportunity. He set aside a significant sum to help both his grandchildren pursue advanced degrees without crippling debt. Your parents were appointed as trustees after his death, with the understanding that the funds would be used equally for both of you." "They never mentioned this," I said, my mind racing. "Not once. I've been troubled by some comments your mother made over the years," grandmother continued. "But I had no idea the disparity was this severe. I have copies of the original trust documents in my files. I'm coming to Chicago next month, and I'd like to show them to you." The following weeks passed in a blur of long shifts and intensive research. I began methodically documenting every instance of financial disparity I could remember, with dates, amounts, and any witnesses. Sophia helped create a spreadsheet tracking the estimated total value of the differential treatment over the years. Dr. Marshall continued providing professional support and mentorship, adjusting my schedule when possible to allow me time to address the situation without sacrificing my education. His confidence in my abilities as a physician helped sustain me through the increasing strain. Grandmother Ruth arrived in Chicago in late July, bringing with her a folder of legal documents. Meeting in a quiet cafe near my apartment, she showed me my grandfather's original trust documents. "Here," she said, pointing to a key paragraph. "The George Bennett Educational Trust, established for the equal benefit of his grandchildren, Forrest and Ashley Bennett, to be used exclusively for undergraduate and graduate educational expenses." The document was unmistakably clear. The trust had been substantial, more than enough to cover both our medical educations with equal support. There was no provision for unequal distribution. "Your parents have violated the terms of this trust," my grandmother said bluntly. "And I've amended my own will to address this inequity. But I'd rather see this resolved while I'm still alive." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting she replied with determination. That we confront them together, with documentation, at this celebration they're planning. It's time for this family to face the truth. As the date of Ashley's debt-free celebration approached, I assembled a team of supporters. Dr. Marshall offered his professional perspective on how the financial disparity had affected my medical training. Sarah Kaplan provided legal insights on the trust violations. Sophia organized all the documentation into a clear, factual presentation. And Grandmother Ruth provided both the critical trust documents and the moral authority of a family elder. The night before the confrontation, Ashley called me, her voice unusually hesitant. "Forrest, I know things have been weird between us. Are you coming tomorrow?" "Yes," I said simply. "Mom and Dad have gone all out," she continued. "They've invited basically the entire extended family, plus their friends. It's a lot." "I'll be there," I repeated, unsure what else to say. "Forrest." She paused, then continued in a rush. "I know, it's not fair, what they're doing. I've always known. I never knew how to address it without seeming ungrateful. And then it just got bigger and harder to talk about. And, it's not your fault," I interrupted, realizing I meant it. Ashley hadn't created this situation, even if she had benefited from it. But it needs to be addressed. "I know," she said quietly. "I've felt guilty for years. I just want you to know. I'll stand with you. Whatever happens tomorrow. This has gone on too long." Her unexpected alliance was the final piece I needed. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of Ashley's debt-free celebration dawned clear and sunny. A perfect Chicago summer day that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing within me. I had barely slept, mentally rehearsing what needed to be said and how to say it. Sophia arrived at my apartment early, carrying a professional portfolio containing all our documentation. We had organized everything meticulously. Trust documents, loan statements, property records, and a PowerPoint presentation showing the financial impact of my parents' decisions in clear, undeniable graphs and charts. "Are you sure you want to do this publicly?" she asked, not for the first time. "We could request a private family meeting instead." I shook my head. They chose to celebrate this inequity publicly. The response should be equally public. Dr. Marshall had helped me prepare emotionally for the confrontation, emphasizing the importance of remaining factual and calm. "This isn't about punishing your parents," he had advised. "It's about correcting an injustice and healing a family wound. Keep that goal in mind when emotions run high." Grandmother Ruth called to confirm she had arrived in Chicago and would meet us at the restaurant. "I've brought additional documents," she said. "Bank statements showing transfers from the trust to Ashley's accounts over the years, with nothing comparable for you." I finished dressing in my best suit, the one I had worn for medical school interviews. This felt equally momentous, a turning point that would define my future relationship with my family. As we drove to the upscale Chicago steakhouse my parents had rented for the occasion, Sophia squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." This took courage. The restaurant's private room was elaborately decorated with congratulatory banners and floral arrangements. A large cake displayed the words, "Congratulations, Dr. Ashley Bennett, debt-free and flying high." A champagne tower stood ready for toasts, and gift bags with custom financial freedom labels sat at each place setting. My parents greeted me with the slightly distant affection I had grown accustomed to, quickly turning their attention back to Ashley and the arriving guests. Grandmother Ruth entered shortly after us, her presence generating surprised murmurs. She rarely traveled for family events anymore, making her appearance noteworthy. "Mother," my father said, visibly confused. "I didn't know you were coming." "You didn't?" "RSVP. Some occasions require presence rather than permission," she replied cryptically, taking a seat next to me at the family table. Extended family members filled the room, along with my parents' friends and colleagues. I recognized aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years, many of them glancing curiously between Ashley and me, perhaps sensing the underlying tension. My mother took the microphone as the meal concluded, tapping her glass for attention. "We're here to celebrate a remarkable achievement," she began. "Our daughter Ashley has completed medical school and begun her dermatology residency, completely debt-free, thanks to careful planning and support." Dad joined her, raising his glass. "To Ashley, who has always made us proud with her determination to overcome obstacles and achieve her dreams. Today, while most of her peers face decades of loan repayments, she begins her career unburdened, free to focus entirely on becoming an exceptional physician." The guests applauded enthusiastically. I noticed several glancing uncomfortably in my direction, clearly aware that I had graduated simultaneously, yet received no similar celebration. Ashley herself looked increasingly uncomfortable as the speeches continued, her eyes frequently finding mine across the room. When Mom announced it was time for the Freedom Key ceremony, a symbolic presentation of a golden key representing Ashley's debt freedom, Ashley abruptly stood. "Before we continue," she said, her voice shaky but determined, "I think we should hear from Forrest. After all, we graduated together." A surprised murmur ran through the crowd. This clearly wasn't part of the planned program. "Oh," Mom faltered, "of course. Forrest, would you like to say a few words about your sister's achievement?" I rose slowly, Sophia's supportive nod giving me courage. Grandmother Ruth squeezed my arm as I moved toward the front of the room. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "Today is indeed about celebration, but also about truth." I opened the portfolio. Sophia handed me, removing the first document, a comparison of our educational debts. Ashley and I began the same journey on the same day. We worked equally hard through the same medical school curriculum. We both graduated with honors. I displayed the first slide on my phone, connected to the room's presentation screen. The difference is that Ashley graduates with $0 in educational debt, while I carry $325,000 that will take at least 15 years to repay. A collective gasp rippled through the room. This was not the congratulatory toast they had expected. "Forrest," my father interrupted, his face flushing. "This is hardly the time or place for financial discussions." "I disagree," I replied calmly. "You've made this public, with this celebration. The inequity should be equally public." I continued through the presentation methodically, showing the documented pattern of financial favoritism over the years, from childhood through medical school. Each slide elicited more shocked reactions from the guests, many of whom clearly had no idea of the disparity between the twins. When I reached the slide showing the vacation property purchased in Ashley's name as a graduation gift, my father stood. "Enough," he demanded. "This is inappropriate and ungrateful. We've helped both our children based on their needs and merits." Grandmother Ruth rose then, her voice cutting through the tension with the authority of age and family position. "Sit down, Richard. Your son deserves to be heard." The room fell silent. My grandmother rarely asserted herself this way, making her intervention all the more powerful. I continued with the most critical evidence: the trust documents establishing my grandfather's educational fund for both grandchildren equally. This trust, I explained, displaying the key provisions on screen, was explicitly established to provide equal educational support to both Ashley and me. It contained more than enough funds to pay for both our medical educations in full. I turned to face my parents directly. "You were appointed as trustees with a legal and moral obligation to administer these funds equally. Instead, you diverted them primarily to Ashley, while allowing me to accumulate massive debt. This isn't just unfair. According to 2 separate attorneys I've consulted, it constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty." The silence in the room was absolute. My father's face had drained of color, while my mother looked on the verge of tears. Ashley had moved to stand beside me, her presence a silent endorsement of my words. "I'm not here to create a family rift," I continued, softening my tone slightly. "I'm here because this inequity needs to be addressed before it permanently damages our family. I deserve the same support my sister received, as our grandfather intended." As I concluded, Ashley took the microphone. "I need to say something too," she said, her voice trembling. "I've benefited from this situation, but I've also felt increasingly uncomfortable with it over the years. Forrest and I achieved the same milestone, and we deserved equal support. I stand with my brother in asking for this to be made right." The room erupted in murmured conversations, with various family members expressing shock or agreement. My parents huddled together at their table, conferring intensely. Then, to everyone's surprise, a well-dressed older man stood from a corner table. I recognized him as Walter Simmons, my parents' longtime family attorney. "If I may," he said, approaching the front of the room, "I feel professionally obligated to confirm that Mr. Bennett is correct about the terms of George Bennett's educational trust. As the attorney who helped draft that document, I can verify that it explicitly required equal distribution between both grandchildren. I've been uncomfortable with how those funds have been allocated for some time, but assumed it reflected the wishes of both beneficiaries. This unexpected professional confirmation sent another shockwave through the gathering. My parents' carefully constructed narrative was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Grandmother Ruth joined us at the front, completing our unlikely alliance. "This family has a decision to make," she announced. "We can address this inequity now, together, or we can allow it to fester into something that permanently divides us. I, for one, will not stand by and watch my late husband's wishes be disregarded, nor my grandson treated unjustly." The celebration had transformed into a family reckoning, years of carefully concealed favoritism suddenly exposed to the light. As uncomfortable as it was, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The truth was finally out, and there would be no returning to the way things had been. The elegant celebration room had become the setting for an unexpected family tribunal. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some discreetly checking their phones for escape opportunities, others leaning forward with undisguised interest in the unfolding drama. My father finally broke the tense silence, his voice strained as he addressed the room. "This is a private family matter that's being misrepresented. We should continue this discussion another time." "No," I replied firmly. "This has been avoided and deflected for years. We're addressing it now." Sophia distributed copies of a financial summary to key family members, while Grandmother Ruth provided the original trust documents to Walter Simmons for verification. The trust was substantial, Grandmother explained to the stunned gathering. George set aside $800,000 specifically for Forrest and Ashley's education. The instructions were explicit that it should benefit them equally. Richard and Catherine. Walter Simmons addressed my parents with obvious discomfort. "The documentation here is concerning. The trust disbursements show nearly 90% of the funds went toward Ashley's education and related expenses." My mother burst into tears. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Ashley has always needed more help. Forrest is naturally gifted, naturally strong. We knew he would succeed no matter what. So I'm being punished for being capable?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "How does that make sense?" "It's not punishment," Dad insisted, his face flushed. "We made decisions based on who needed support more. Ashley has always been more vulnerable." Ashley stepped forward, her expression a mix of hurt and determination. "That's not fair to either of us, Dad. You've treated Forrest like his accomplishments don't matter, because they came more naturally. And you've treated me like I'm incompetent without your help. Neither is true." Several relatives began voicing their opinions, creating a cascade of overlapping conversations. My Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister, stood up. "I've watched this pattern for years and said nothing," she admitted. "Richard, Catherine, this isn't right. You've clearly favored Ashley since they were children. We have not, Mom protested weakly. The vacation home in Ashley's name, I continued relentlessly, purchased right after graduation, while you advised me to find cheaper housing to manage my loan payments. How do you explain that? This revelation generated another wave of shocked murmurs among the guests. Several began gathering their belongings, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing such an intimate family confrontation. We thought it was a good investment, Dad mumbled. Property in her name while she establishes credit as a physician. And what about my credit? My financial future? I pressed. Walter Simmons cleared his throat. I should inform you, Richard, that, as trustee of George's Educational Trust, you had a legal fiduciary duty to administer the funds according to his explicit instructions. The pattern of disbursement shown here potentially constitutes breach of that duty. Are you threatening legal action? My father demanded, his voice rising. I'm explaining the legal reality, the attorney replied calmly. As your family's legal counsel, I would strongly advise addressing this situation promptly to avoid more formal remedies. The room had divided into clear factions. My parents sat isolated at their table, their celebration thoroughly derailed. Several relatives had moved to stand symbolically near me, Grandmother Ruth and Ashley, while others hovered uncertainly between the groups. A few had discreetly left already, unwilling to witness the family fracture. I think what Forrest is asking for is fair, Ashley said into the awkward silence. Equal treatment was always the right thing to do. I've benefited from your favoritism, but it wasn't right, and I've felt increasingly uncomfortable about it. We did what we thought was best, Mom insisted through tears. Parents make different decisions for different children based on their needs, but the trust wasn't yours to allocate based on your perceptions, Grandmother Ruth countered firmly. George's instructions were clear. Equal support for both grandchildren's education. The confrontation continued for nearly an hour, with various family members weighing in. Uncomfortable truths emerged as relatives shared their own observations of the long-standing pattern of favoritism. The celebration cake sat forgotten, the champagne tower untouched. Walter Simmons eventually suggested a structured approach. The Bennett family clearly needs to address this situation. I propose a formal family meeting at my office next week, with all relevant financial documentation. This can be resolved without lasting damage, if addressed promptly and fairly. My father, looking defeated, finally nodded. Fine. We'll meet and discuss options. As the gathering broke up, guests departing with awkward goodbyes, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The secret burden I had carried for years was finally out in the open. Whether or not my parents ultimately acknowledged their wrongdoing, I would no longer participate in the pretense that we had been treated equally. Sophia squeezed my hand supportively as we gathered our documentation. You did it, she whispered. That took incredible courage. Ashley approached us, her eyes red from crying. I'm sorry, Forrest. I should have said something years ago. I always knew it wasn't fair. But it was easier to accept the advantages than to question them. It's not your fault, I replied, meaning it. You didn't create the situation, but I benefited from it, she acknowledged. And I want to be part of making it right. Grandmother Ruth joined us, her expression weary but determined. This was necessary, but only the beginning. The real work starts now, rebuilding this family on a foundation of truth and fairness, rather than favoritism and secrecy. As we left the restaurant, I glanced back to see my parents sitting alone at their table, surrounded by the elaborate decorations meant to celebrate an advantage that had never been rightfully theirs to give. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that justice might finally be possible. The 2 weeks following the confrontation passed in tense silence. My parents made no attempt to contact me, though Ashley called daily with updates from her perspective. Grandmother Ruth returned to Arizona, but remained actively involved through frequent calls and emails. Walter Simmons, true to his word, arranged a formal family meeting at his downtown Chicago office. The morning of the meeting, Dr. Marshall pulled me aside after rounds. "How are you holding up?" "Surprisingly okay," I admitted. "Whatever happens today, the truth is out. That's a victory in itself." He nodded. "Remember, this isn't just about the money. It's about establishing healthy family dynamics going forward. Keep that bigger goal in mind." The conference room at Simmons Legal Group felt appropriately neutral, yet formal. My parents arrived first, looking tense and defensive. Ashley came separately, choosing to sit beside me rather than them, a silent statement that resonated throughout the room. Grandmother Ruth participated via video conference, her image projected on a wall screen. Sophia waited supportively in the reception area, respecting the family nature of the meeting. Walter began by establishing ground rules. "We're here to address a specific financial inequity and find a resolution that honors George Bennett's wishes while allowing this family to heal. I suggest we focus on solutions rather than relitigating past decisions." The initial discussion was difficult. My parents continued defending their choices, insisting they had acted in everyone's best interests. "We always believed Forrest would be fine," Dad maintained. "He's always been the strong one, the independent one. That doesn't justify ignoring grandfather's explicit instructions," I replied calmly. The trust was for both of us, equally, gradually. As Walter methodically reviewed the documentation, my parents' position weakened. The numbers were undeniable. While Ashley had received approximately $720,000 in educational and financial support, I had received barely $80,000. "The disparity is clear," Walter concluded. "Now we need to discuss how to address it." Mom finally broke down. "We never meant to hurt you, Forrest. Ashley always seemed to need more support. She struggled more with academics, with social situations. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. So I was punished for being competent," I said quietly. "We didn't see it that way," she protested weakly. "That's exactly what happened," Ashley interjected surprisingly. "I've benefited from this my entire life, and it wasn't fair. Forrest worked just as hard as I did, often harder. He deserved the same support." Dad looked at her with surprise, clearly unprepared for his favored child to turn critic. "Here's the reality," Walter said firmly. "The trust was administered improperly. Forrest has legal grounds to contest this, which would become a matter of public record and potentially result in financial penalties beyond the original inequity." My parents exchanged alarmed glances. "However," he continued, "I believe Forrest would prefer a family resolution that addresses the core issue without legal proceedings." "Is that accurate?" I nodded. "I want fairness, not punishment. But real fairness, not symbolic gestures." Walter presented two options. My parents could immediately pay off my medical school loans in full, placing me in the same debt-free position as Ashley, or face potential legal action for breach of fiduciary duty. The discussion continued for hours, with my parents gradually moving from denial to reluctant acknowledgement of the inequity they had created. By afternoon, they had agreed to pay off my educational debt in full, with additional compensation for the vacation property gifted to Ashley. "We'll need to liquidate some investments," Dad said, his voice subdued, "but it can be arranged within 30 days. The financial resolution was only the beginning. At Grandmother Ruth's insistence, we also discussed the emotional aspects of the situation. "This family has a pattern of favoritism that needs addressing beyond the financial element," she stated firmly. "I suggest family therapy to ensure these dynamics don't continue to the next generation." To my surprise, my parents agreed, albeit reluctantly. Ashley supported the idea enthusiastically, revealing how the pressure of being the favored child had created its own burdens and insecurities. "I never felt I deserved the special treatment," she admitted. "It always made me feel like you didn't think I could succeed on my own merits." As the meeting concluded with signed agreements and scheduled follow-ups, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief at the financial resolution, certainly, but also a cautious hope that this painful confrontation might eventually lead to healthier family relationships. 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. My loans had been paid in full, lifting an enormous weight from my shoulders. Without the crushing financial pressure, my performance at the hospital improved dramatically. Dr. Marshall noted the change during my semi-annual review. "You've always had exceptional clinical instincts," he said. "Now you have the mental space to fully apply them. Your patient satisfaction scores are among the highest in the program." Ashley and I had begun rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. The unhealthy competition fostered by our parents' favoritism had been replaced by genuine support and respect for each other's different strengths and challenges. "I'm actually glad this happened," she confessed during one of our now regular sibling dinners. "As painful as it was, I feel like I'm standing on my own accomplishments now, not on unfair advantages." The family therapy sessions had been difficult, but productive. My parents, though initially defensive, gradually began acknowledging the pattern of favoritism and its damaging effects. Mom, in particular, had gained insight into how her perception of Ashley, as more vulnerable, had actually undermined both her children's confidence and independence. "I always thought I was protecting her," she admitted during one particularly emotional session. "Instead, I was sending the message that I didn't believe she could succeed without special treatment. And I was telling Forrest his accomplishments didn't matter because they came more naturally." Grandmother Ruth had established a new educational trust for any future great-grandchildren, with ironclad provisions ensuring equal distribution, regardless of which twin became a parent first. 1 year after the confrontation, I received the hospital's Resident Excellence Award for outstanding clinical performance and patient care. To my surprise, my parents attended the ceremony, visibly proud as I accepted the recognition. "We want you to know," Dad said awkwardly at the dinner afterward, "how proud we are of what you've accomplished. We should have shown that more clearly all along." The words didn't erase the years of unequal treatment, but they represented a step toward healing. Sophia and I became engaged that spring, our relationship strengthened by navigating the family crisis together. When my parents offered the same financial contribution toward our wedding that they had provided for Ashley's the previous year, I recognized it as another step in their effort to establish equality. During our final family dinner before Sophia and I relocated for my fellowship in emergency medicine, I looked around the table and marveled at the transformation. My parents still occasionally slipped into old patterns but caught themselves more quickly. Ashley had developed a new confidence based on her actual abilities, rather than parental favoritism. And I had found my voice, learning that advocating for myself wasn't selfish but necessary. The financial resolution had been important, but the deeper victory was in breaking the destructive pattern that had shaped our family for decades. By standing up for fairness, I had not only secured my own financial future, but helped create a healthier family dynamic for all of us. The hardest part, I told Sophia later that night, was taking that first step, speaking the truth that everyone pretended not to see. But it was worth every uncomfortable moment. The experience had taught me that true family love demands honesty and fairness, not silent acceptance of injustice. Sometimes the most loving action is standing firm for what's right, even when it disrupts the comfortable patterns that everyone has grown accustomed to maintaining. That lesson would serve me well in medicine and in life, guiding me to address problems directly rather than allowing them to grow in silence. The scars of those difficult years would always remain, but they had healed into something stronger than before. Have you ever experienced unfair treatment within your family, or witnessed favoritism among siblings? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content like this, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message of standing up for fairness. Thank you for listening, and remember that speaking your truth, even when it's difficult, is often the first step toward healing.